Well, it's been another interesting weekend in Hull City camp as the transfer embargo has been lifted, but it's not all good news as the fee restriction has still remained in place. So Hull City, what's next for them as they try and cope with this transfer window being a bit of a lacklustre one at the moment? Of course, things can change and they will constantly change surrounding this sort of situation. Hello there, welcome back to the HullCityFanCentral YouTube channel where today I'll be going through Hull City's transfer embargo that has been lifted and what is next for Hull City as they try and work their way through this transfer window. So, big news, transfer embargo has been lifted, which means we can now sign players. It's just limited on who we can sign. We can only sign loaned players that have no fees attached to them, so meaning that Hull City do not owe any amount of money to another club for that loan player. And also, of course, free transfers, which we could not sign before the embargo was lifted. We couldn't sign anyone. It seems like the embargo didn't actually take full effect, as on EFL's website, we were never listed as a team that were under embargo, presumably because Hull City had already paid the 1 million outstanding to Aston Villa, which was the big sort of turning point in the embargo sort of situation for Hull City. And they have paid the £1 million off for obviously last season's loan fee for Louis Barry, but they've paid it off. That's all done. Embargo no longer. Just this fee restriction for the next 3 transfer windows, which Hull City have to try and work around. I did report over the weekend that Hull City have begun their appeal for the to lift the transfer fee restriction, and hopefully that it'll either be lifted or shortened. Most likely it will be shortened. I suspect at a very minimum Hull City will have the transfer fee restriction for this transfer window, and maybe of course the last 2 restrictions, so obviously in January and then summer of next year, maybe have that lifted. That's on the very, very good case scenario. On the worst case scenario, we have a fee restriction for the next 3 transfer windows, and who knows where we go from there, where we're not only allowed to sign loan players that have no fees attached and free players for them 3 transfer windows. But the appeal has been taking place from Hull City's camp, and we'll wait and see on what can happen from here, what the EFL sort of deem from here. But I suspect on a bare minimum, this transfer window will be hit with this fee restriction that will stand throughout the entire transfer window because, of course, that payment was late and was outstanding. I mean, that's happened now. You can't go back on that. So there has to be some sort of punishment for that. Also over the weekend, Hull City held a behind closed doors friendly with Lincoln City. Unfortunately, they did lose 2-0 in this friendly. I will just quickly pull up what Hull City had to say on the matter. But some good news surrounding this friendly. Yes, we did lose. I mean, you're not really expecting too much, considering it's the end of the week, end of week 1 in pre-season, and end of Sergei Yakerevich's first week against the Lincoln City side that, of course, have been building themselves for quite some time under the one leadership. But some good development there from Hull City as John Joe Shelby took place in this friendly. Of course, we reported that he's been in Hull City's camp getting his fitness up and sort of evaluating to see whether Hull City do want to make that free signing actually happen. But also some youngsters were involved, such as Pharrell Brown. I know there was some others involved in the friendly. I think it was sort of a bit of a nice refresher to see some faces involved. A little bit of a side note, Hull City were playing in their 3rd kit, I believe, from last season. And then obviously they've been still training in the training kit from last season. So whether that's got to pay into some sort of aspect with the financial troubles that Adjan's currently going on with, who really knows? Of course, we'll discuss that in a minute on Adjan actually has a full statement that he's released sort of to say what he feels about the situation. But here's what Hull City have to say. Hull City were beaten by Lincoln City in a behind closed doors friendly at the club's Cottingham training ground. The Tigers' first outing gave head coach Sergei Yakerevich the opportunity to assess his squad in a match situation and build fitness after a productive opening week of pre-season training. Only goalkeeper Ivor Panda completed the full game with 20 outfield players, each given 45 minutes of valuable playing time. So it was a half game sort of situation where Panda and 10 other players would get the first half, and Panda and 10 other players would get the second half. James Collins was denied early by a superb sprawling save from Panda before giving the Imps a 15th minute lead with a glancing near post header from Eric Rings in swinging corner. Tigers' best chance of first half came in the 41st minute when Mason Burstow's right-footed effort was blocked by the foot of Lincoln goalkeeper Zach Geacock. Zane Myers, another youngster who was involved, came close to equalising in the 64th minute, expertly taking down a diagonal ball and skipping inside his man, but Imps shot stopper George Wickens smothered his left-footed finish. Noah Wadsworth, edge of the box drive 7 minutes later, had the visiting custodian scrambling across his line, but deflected narrowly wide. There we go, got it out in the end. Lincoln doubled their lead with 5 minutes remaining when Jevon, I'm not sure about that one, Makama latched onto a lofted pass before arrowing an unearning angled drive across Panda into the far bottom corner. Jack Moylan almost added another in the final stages as his shot on the turn of the 18-yard clipped off the base of the post. So nice to see some youngsters involved. Of course, that's one thing that we've been saying about this sort of embargo, fee restriction, whole financial sort of situation at Hull City is it's given a good chance for us to really look at the youth and the academy and go, we actually need to get these involved now, considering that we can't pay for any players, loan or permanent deals. We can only sign free and loans that have no fees attached. We really need to assess what we have in store in-house. Who can help us on the field, who can maybe help us fetch a fee and bring some money in and sort of build up our back pocket for them. Maybe once we're out of the embargo, we can have sort of a nice sort of chunk of change and go, hang on, we can spend this wisely and maybe not spend it as irrationally as we have done in the seasons prior. So a bit of a statement sort of coming out. This was released by Mike White, and it's not, he said it's not an interview with Adrian Ilajali, but more of a brief conversation. So I'll read the full sort of thing that he put out. EFL sanction / Aston Villa / Louis Barry. As mentioned in the short club statement yesterday, Adrian Ilajali confirmed that they are appealing the sanction issued by the EFL as he believes it is a misunderstanding. Interesting. He says Hull City and Aston Villa had an existing agreement in place that goes back to the sale of Jayden Philogene back to Villa and his subsequent move to Ipswich. I asked if City and Villa have the paperwork and the documentation to support this claim. Ilajali said they do. So interesting. Another side note, Aston Villa have also been sanctioned, albeit just for a fee from the Premier League due to financial fair play. But I mean, we've seen that coming. That's why they wanted to get rid of Louis Barry onto us for a permanent deal to sort of balance the books there. Back to this sort of statement. As part of that sale, City were due a sell-on from it, which Ilajali tells me in agreement with Villa that would form part of the Louis Barry loan agreement and that we will owe money. And they owe money. He says the EFL are claiming that it's a separate arrangement and does not have a bearing on this. Ilajali believes this is a technicality. Ilajali states that the two clubs are in full agreement and that there is zero conflict / zero problem. In relation to his comments to the fans at Monday night's Q&A with the fans, he says that he stands by his remarks that there are no financial problems. When I said we don't have any financial problems, what I mean is as we, Adrian Media Group, are here to support the club. And I asked him to clarify. Ilajali said Adrian Media are paying money if there is a shortfall to meet financial commitments, which he pointed out may be caused if other money owed to the club is delayed. Ilajali says he is upset that some fans think he has done wrong, but reiterates that he does not believe the club have concern over their financial situation. So Ilajali restating himself there, saying there is no sort of financial worry at the club, that the whole sort of sanctioned thing that's happened is a misunderstanding and more of a technicality situation that by the sounds of things there, he's not fully understood it from a business point of view, from a club business point of view with the EFL and Aston Villa. He's more of gone it, well, we sort of had a gentleman's agreement behind closed doors, and that's that. Where it's, you sort of have to look at these situations black and white. What does it say on the paper? You've got to abide by that ruling, by that law. So from what he said there, it's most likely going to be a situation of this transfer window is going to have the restriction on, and then maybe the subsequential January and then summer of 2026 transfer windows may not have any restriction attached to them, of course, because a 3 transfer window restriction for a bit of a misunderstanding like this might be a bit far, unless there is no sort of truth in his statement saying that there is no financial problems. Of course, we've mentioned in the video that we did on Friday about the Adyen Media Group paying the fees and loaning money from there to the club to pay, and apparently Adyen doesn't want any of that money back to the Adyen Media Group. He still seems pretty much firm on that. The loans there are coming out from him, and therefore he doesn't want to recoup any payments, or certainly not at the moment. So a very interesting one there. But of course, Hull City will most likely be in a bit of a rut for this transfer window. 3 transfers is all we can seem to get. So who is on the cards? Well, of course, there's a few former Tigers. Of course, you've got Aaron Connolly. He's a free agent after leaving Millwall this past season, so could be picking him back up. Of course, Aaron Connolly, if you keep him fit, he did an alright job for us under Rosenior in that sort of season there when he was fit, especially early on in the season. He was sort of a dynamite off the bench. He came off the bench and was grabbing a couple of goals in every game, it seemed, for that first little bit of the season. So Aaron Connolly, certainly someone that could maybe have a reunited affair with Hull City. Of course, Brandon Fleming, just recently released from Hull City in the non-retained list. I doubt that Hull City would probably go back there, it being a free transfer. Of course, Brandon Fleming can play kind of all over the defence, more known for his primary basis as a left-back, left-wing-back. Well, we've just let Matty Jacob go out on loan, so I highly doubt that Brandon Fleming would be coming in to sort of replace that role there. Some good players that are out on free transfers, like Victor Moses, Tim Krul. Of course, Victor Moses may be a player you're looking out for. Didn't do too well this past season, of course, with Luton. As we say, John Joe Shelby, currently at the club at the moment. We'll see what the situation is there, whether his fitness can prove to Hull City. A few Sheffield Wednesday players, of course, out on free transfers because they weren't paid. So you've got quite a few ones. You've got Marvin Johnson, who's a bit of a workhorse in the midfield for Sheffield Wednesday this past season. You've also got, what's our friend Deshaun Bernard. I believe that he's sort of opted out of his contract due to not being paid. You've got Stuart Armstrong from Sheffield Wednesday as well. So a couple of players from Sheffield Wednesday that Hull City could theoretically pick up on. You've got a few good attacking options as well, like O'Neill Cruz, or O'Neill Hernandez, sorry, from Norwich. Another good attacker in Wells from Bristol City. Grabbed, I believe, 10 goals last season. Certainly a good one. Duncan Watmore from Millwall. Grabbed 5 goals and 26 appearances last season. So there's a few good attackers on the free transfer market. But where will Hull City pick up their attacking quality from? Well, it might not be necessarily from the free transfer market. It might be more of a bit of a workaround loan deal. We've talked about Frigan, the deal for Frigan, and that one's been one that's sort of been going on underneath the surface for quite a while. Of course, Frigan wanting to reunite himself with Sergei Yakirovich and everything surrounding that. Well, it sounds like it's probably going to happen. KVC Westerlo have sort of agreed in principle a loan deal to send Frigan to Hull City with an option to buy, and the fees also coming later on. So it's at the moment it's a completely free loan deal for Frigan, where the fees will be added on later on when Hull City can obviously pay them due to the fee restriction they're in at the moment. And then there's an option to buy there later on as well, presumably at some sort of a discounted price, or maybe at the €7 million fee that we'd sort of known about before the embargo and fee restriction was placed on. it sounds like it might be a very, very nice one. I think he has sort of flown into Hull City, or flown into Hull certainly today or yesterday. So we'll wait and see how this one sort of shapes out. He's done a fly past the stadium. It seems like it's pretty much him coming in to sort of do the final technicalities of fitness and sort of do the photo shoot at the stadium. But it might be a case of within the next couple of days we could have our first fee restriction era of the Tigers signing in Matija Frigan. I was told it might be a bit different, so I'm just gonna call him Frigan at the moment before he actually says his name for me. But Frigan on his way in, sounding good, and it's quite nice to have a very, very prominent striker wanting to come in during these uncertain times, and all the clubs involved were having a workaround on it. A player that is most likely going to be leaving, and that's Abdush Ömer. Ömer has just taken place in a testimonial match in Turkey. He hasn't returned back to Cottingham and back to the MKM Stadium since the end of last season. Of course, he was in Turkey then, so really since January transfer window he hasn't been back, and it's most likely going to be because he's trying to facilitate this move back to Turkey for a permanent deal, which would be good. Money into our back pocket, of course. That's all we need really at this point in time, is to sign players on the cheap that can do well, free transfers, loan deals without any fees, and then gain money in our back pocket through sort of deals like this where Ömer, he's got a large wage bill and we could probably fetch a pretty penny for him in the transfer market. So it seems like quite a nice one. Of course, Ömer has quite a few Turkish teams interested in him. So one final sort of thing to note, and that's one of Hull City's sponsors was no longer a Hull City sponsor. Safi Port announced that its sponsorship with Hull City and their agreement there has ended and will not be renewed for this new season. I will reiterate on this one, not the end of the world. It's not them saying that they're cutting ties because of some dodgy dealings behind the scenes or whatever. That might have been the case with some sponsors in seasons prior. It seemed like this one was sort of boiling on from the end of last season. I think in their official statement that they put out was that it was mainly due to last season, or that's sort of what I gathered from it. I can't fully read their press release because it's obviously in Turkish, but they are no longer a sponsor of Hull City, which obviously does mean less money coming in. Presumably Adjan is already working on trying to bring in a new sponsor, a sort of deal there to replace that. Of course, he needs the money in the back end. He can't keep on losing money. Of course, he says we're not in a financial problem because he is getting the money in from his personal company, Adjan Media Group. But of course, that's only a limited amount of money. He only has so much money there. And if he keeps on losing, well, his company's going to go under. The club will eventually go under. So, of course, sponsors and maybe endorsers will be needed sooner rather than later. But, of course, that is all that's going on at Hull City at the moment. Just a very minute amount of things going on at the club at the moment. Of course, I'll keep you up on how things shake out with the appeal for the transfer fee restriction. Of course, the Frigan deal and plenty more deals that could be going on with this free transfer market, the loan transfer market, and how Hull City might shape themselves up for this upcoming season that, yet again, will be a very interesting one for the Tigers. So make sure you stay tuned on the channel by liking and subscribing. I'll keep you down everything Hull City, including transfer news, all of the back-end stuff, everything surrounding Hull City. So I'll see you in the next video. Up the Tigers!